Yes, I am the budget chairman. Yes, we are going to pass a budget one way or the other. The bad news is, and of course this is typical Jack Latvala luck, the year I get to be budget chairman, we have an outlook, and we found out that I got all of $7.5 million extra to spend. And Bill Mumford's list alone is already bigger than that. So I think what a lot of people don't realize about that outlook, though, is that we already have baked into that outlook the average of the spending increases in a number of areas like education and so forth. We baked in there the about 200 and some odd million and the average of tax cuts of the last 3 years. And so, you know, there is some cushion. It's not as bleak as it might appear to be, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of extra money. And if there is any extra money, our Senate President-designate's already promised it out between the universities and the Everglades folks and so forth. So it's going to be my job to try to make all that come together and produce a budget that covers all the needs that we have. We have, you know, some significant needs. We have been living, is that Representative Fitzenhagen? Well, good morning. Nice to see you. We've been living year to year with our major focus on getting reelected, cutting taxes and getting reelected, and we wake up, and I asked my staff this week or last week to give me the tabulation of the total recurring taxes that we have cut since 2000 and what the actual impact on the budget that number is. And I thought it'd be $1 billion, maybe in the $1 billion range, and I was really surprised to see that it exceeds $2.7 billion in recurring revenue that we have cut in tax cuts since 2000. And that doesn't include anything that's been done in terms of the non-recurring, using our extra money in the pot of money, or using the money that we used this past year to reduce property taxes. That's items that were recurring revenue, recurring taxes that we've cut. So that's part of the issue, is that when you cut spending, and I disagree with Speaker Designate Corcoran. I don't think that the budget problem is a spending problem. I think it's where we're at today is largely a result of the reductions that we have voted over the last 10 or 15 years. Now, I voted for every one of them, so, you know, I've got to take partial responsibility for that. But I think to look at this year's budget and say that there's a lot of fat that's still in our state budget that needs to be cut is incorrect. Our state employees haven't had a pay raise except a bonus year in 8 years. And my number one priority as a Senate Appropriations Chairman this year is to get some sort of pay raise for state employees. And if other people want to have their priorities, that's fine, but I'm going to get my priority too if they get theirs. And that's just the way I look at it. And those of you that have worked with me know how that works. So I think, you know, that at least in terms of the budget the Senate prepares, I'm very optimistic that we're going to have a little something in there for state employees. And I know a lot of you are married to state employees or have state employees in the family or whatever. And, you know, there is, you know, some of our members in the legislature just think state employees are just like a worthless baggage. And I don't know how we'd run state government without them. We have a lot of our state employees that put themselves in harm's way every single morning when a state trooper puts on their uniform. They don't know when they're going to walk up to a car and they're going to have some crazy person that's going to be firing a gun at them. But they do the job. Our correction officers, recently we had a correction officer stabbed in the neck in Lake City, in the Lake City Correctional Facility, and stabbed in the neck. That officer was by himself in the yard with 150 inmates when that happened. Our prisons are a powder keg. Our mental health system has a lot of problems in it. Our state mental hospitals have a lot of issues. You just go down the line, our foster care system. We had kids sleeping in offices in Tampa that are in the state's foster care help. And we just can't let that continue. Someone has to look at those. And now we talk about water. I can't think of a time in the history since I've been involved in the Senate, which goes back 22 years, when we've had so many crises affecting water the same time period as we have today. In my area, we had over 250 million gallons of effluent, sewage effluent, at one stage or the other, and we'll never know. We'll never know how much of that was raw sewage and how much of it had already been treated twice but just hadn't been treated the third time. But there's over 250 million gallons that went into Tampa Bay. We're all looking at the situation in the county that I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in, actually, where we've got a sinkhole. And you know, the phosphate pits, the slag pits, you know, they've been there since I was a kid, so that's 50 years. I can take you to some that were near where I live that were there 50 years ago, exactly like they are today, and now we have a sinkhole and everybody's surprised. You know, the situation that we have coming out of Lake Okeechobee with the algae. You know, I just had somebody just this morning tell me that, it's too bad about the sugar companies, what they're doing to Lake Okeechobee. And I had to tell this individual, no, the sugar companies haven't back pumped into Lake Okeechobee for 10 or 12 years, that where that problem is coming from is right outside in this parking lot, right here in this hotel, and all in the city of Orlando, and it's all going south to Lake Okeechobee. We've got to deal with that. Whatever the cause, we got to clean it up. All of that takes money, and all of that falls, unfortunately, on our watch that we have for the coming year. Now, that's not even to get into fresh water, our water supply. Some of you know, when I was in the Senate in the 90s, we had a very significant water issue in the Tampa Bay area. We had a situation where Pinellas County, where I live, we ran out of water under our county. The saltwater intrusion and the fact that we had, the most densely populated county in the state contributed to the need to go look other places for water. So our county commission did a very foresighted, thinking ahead thing all those years ago, and they bought tracts of raw land in Pasco and Hillsborough County, and they put well fields in there. The problem is they kept pumping, and those well fields started drying up the lakes and the wells of people that lived in those counties. So when I got elected to the Senate the first time in 1994, we had lawsuits going back and forth between Pinellas and the other counties, between Pinellas and the Water Management District, and we had the very real possibility we were going to have a building moratorium in the Tampa Bay area. So we got involved, we pulled local governments together, the 6 local governments, a 2-year process, and we created Tampa Bay Water, which is, I think, certainly my biggest accomplishment in public office, and has become a model for how we need to approach our water supply needs in the rest of the state. Commissioner of Agriculture gives speeches where he talks about we're going to be 3 billion gallons a day short in our fresh water supply by 2030. Well, 2030 is only 14 years from now. 3 billion gallons of water, where's it going to come from? We need to start looking at that. We need to start looking at other ways of producing water. Some of that may be in some additional reservoirs in the Everglades. Some of it's probably through desal. Some of it's through a better job of interconnecting and a better job of doing reuse systems. We reuse, almost all of our water in Pinellas County goes through reuse and is available for lawns and golf courses and so forth. But in many areas of the state, this hadn't even been started yet. That's the kind of thing that when we talk about water and we look to the future, that we've got to think about for here in Florida. With regard to the appropriations, I'm sure all of you know the figures better than I do in terms of the bills that we passed to establish, fixed funding for Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades, fixed funding for springs, a lot of degradation in the springs in North Florida. Very few of those big first magnitude springs that are completely pure anymore. We've got a lot of issues up there. We've got surface water issues in lakes, and rivers, and springs, and we got to deal with those. So we set up a mechanism in 2016 to set some money aside, and the Legacy Florida bill to provide that money is coming. And then, of course, Senator Negron has added to that with his plan to bond $100 million a year to start the process of building some reservoirs in the Everglades. I don't know a great deal about his plan. He explained it to me before he announced it. Some of what he announced was different than what he explained to me, or a little more targeted than what he explained to me. But when we talked, he talked about a multifaceted program that included support for the governor's septic tank initiative, which I think is a long past due initiative to try to get people off of septic tanks, especially around water bodies. I wanted to do that 20 years ago, and people like Richard Gentry, when he was at the Home Builders, just wouldn't hear anything about doing that on places like Felipe Creek in Sarasota, where I wanted to get rid of the septic tanks in those days. Well, now the governor has an idea. Senator Negron told me he supported that, and I look forward to being a part of enacting that. We have some projects that have been laid out, that have been engineered, that are in the works in the Everglades and the SEP plan that I think are further down the road than the idea of buying and building a reservoir. And I think we need to try to accomplish as many of those projects as we can as well. I think it needs to be an integrated situation down there, an integrated program. And we got to find willing sellers. And I think in the end, that's going to be a challenge. Senator Negron has a lot of very creative ideas of how we might be able to get there. He's receptive to some different approaches of trading the land and moving around where those reservoirs might be and so forth. And he doesn't want to get in a position where he's negotiating against himself, but I think that he has put the challenge on the table, and that it's up to guys like me to help him find a program that will work for all of us. And I think it's up to the environmental community, the business community, the agriculture community to work together to solve this problem. It is not acceptable to have green stuff flowing down into those marinas in Stewart and into the estuaries over in Representative Fitzenhagen's district. Now, I will say that I went personally to look for the pollution in the Caloosahatchee River. I had a personal day over there with Representative Fitzenhagen where we were looking for that pollution. And I didn't find any pollution the day I went over there. The only thing I found was a 41-inch snook. And we got to make sure that those 41-inch snook can stay there, because that's real important, because that's the biggest snook I've ever caught in my life over there. But we can't allow our property values in those island communities, our tourism, all those things are affected. It's not just enviros. It's not just the white hats that petition and protest and whatever. These are business issues. And why do people move to Florida? Because they like our environment. Why do people move to live on the beach and live on the rivers and so forth? Because they like it. And if we allow those to be desecrated in whatever way, with quality issues, with dead fish floating on the water, dead birds, whatever, that's not going to help keep people coming to Florida, whether it's as tourists or even more importantly, as residents. So we're all in that together. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. The hotel motel industry, the home builders, everybody's got to be involved in finding the solution and not just, not just objecting to people's ideas when they come down the pike. So I look forward to that. I worked with a lot of you through the years. This will be my last 2 years in the Senate. I promise. Promise I'm not coming back to the Senate. But we got a lot to do in the last 2 years that I'm up there, and I look forward to working with you to try to make some of those things happen. Certainly Associated Industries is my favorite. Where is Feeney? Feeney didn't even get up to come in here this morning to hear me. Well, even though he didn't show up, let me just say that Associated Industries is my favorite business organization in Tallahassee, and the one that I like working with. A great team of people there, has the smartest political operator in the state of Florida working for Associated Industries, and we look forward to working together in the next 2 years. Now, I don't know, do I have time for questions? I can't see you. You want me to take any questions? Oh, I get to choose, huh? From Gunster, Yoakley, and Stewart. Will the Senate consider using Amendment $1 for funding water infrastructure projects that meet the requirements of the constitutional language? If they meet the constitutional language, I would consider them. I don't think the way that was written, and I'm the father of Florida Forever. That was my bill, 2000. I'm the one that reenacted it. I'm very upset that the legislature made the decision, to kind of go away from that program. But I'm also someone that sees the priorities and crises and so forth that we've got to deal with. And if I look at buying another, 5,000 acres of pines in Taylor County, as opposed to doing something to help clean up a water supply, I'm going to tilt in that direction. Another one? You got another one? Okay. You got a few more you want to pull out? Okay. What could Florida be doing to help attract stakeholders who bring private capital for water projects in order to better leverage state dollars, perhaps even through public-private partnerships? I supported the bill that Senator Hayes and seems like somebody else was involved in to try to encourage, venture capital investments in infrastructure in Florida. And I would continue to do that. And yes, I agree with public-private partnerships for new projects. I'm not someone who agrees in selling existing assets to private enterprise. That's kind of like in your business trying to survive by selling all your equipment. It doesn't work. So when we look at new projects and things that we might not be able to accomplish as quickly and doing that through public-private partnerships, I'm a big believer in that. What should be our number one priority from the following? Flood control, water supply, or water quality? Probably, probably I would say water quality number one, water supply number two, and flood control number three. I don't have, most of the flood situations are probably beyond help, or so expensive to help that, people just need to adjust where they live and get out of those areas, I would say. We can't build walls like they got in New Orleans around northeast St. Petersburg, or around some of those neighborhoods in West Pasco County in my district. We need to try to do what we can to shift some water, not add to the problems, but we've got to have water that's drinkable and water that doesn't smell bad if we want to keep tourists coming in to keep funding our budget. So that's the order that I'd put them in. All righty. Well, thank you very much. Have a good day.